Hi, everyone. My name is Mona Masri. I'm a Senior Director at Asset Funders Network, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar on the imperative for innovative financing for childcare facilities. Before we get started, I just want to share a bit about Asset Funders Network for those of you who are not familiar with us. Next slide, please. So Asset Funders Network is a membership organization of national, regional, and community-based foundations and grant makers committed to using philanthropy to advance economic equity. Through convenings like we're hosting today, as well as brief and other issue-based meetings, AFN provide funders with the opportunity to engage with each other and community leaders to deepen our collective understanding of emerging issues, rethink our grant-making strategies for investments and partnerships to build equitable wealth and economic mobility. So I want to make sure, next slide, please, to thank our sponsor for today's webinar, the New York Women's Foundation, for their support not only of this virtual convening, but their support for AFN's work on the care economy issues. Next slide, please. And the last thing I'll do before I hand it over to our wonderful moderator today is to just share some logistics. I think we're all experts on Zoom, but just as a recap, if you have any questions during our sessions, please use the Q&A icon that's at the bottom of your screen. And we will, to submit a session anytime, and we will get to as many questions as possible. We've enabled live captioning for this webinar. If you'd like to turn it on, please select the icon at the bottom of your screen that says live caption. We also want to let you know we are recording today's webinar, and we will be sharing both the recording and the PowerPoint presentation and any resources shared as a follow-up to our call today. If you experience any technical issues during today's webinar, please contact us by using the chat box that's located on the control panel on your screen. So let's start by using the chat box now. We'd love to know who's in the room with us. Feel free to drop your name, your pronoun, your organizations, and where you're joining us from. Next slide, please. I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for this very timely and important conversation, and a longtime colleague of mine, Jocelyn Cousins. She's the Assistant Vice President in the Community Development Department at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and she also serves as the Regional Outreach Manager for Nevada. So Jocelyn will briefly introduce each of the speakers right before they present, and their full bios will be made available online. So now I would love to turn it over to Jocelyn.
Great. Thank you so much, Mona. As Mona mentioned, I'm Jocelyn Cousins with the San Francisco Fed, and I have the pleasure of moderating our discussion today with 4 leaders in the childcare space. You all are joining us today because you understand the importance of childcare and caregiving. They are crucial to parents' ability to participate in the workforce. Childcare allows women to remain or join the workforce. Honestly, caregiving and childcare make work possible. Greater access to childcare strengthens our workforce and our broader economy, which is very important to the Federal Reserve Bank. Understanding the important role childcare plays in our economy, in 2020, the San Francisco Fed launched the Investing in the Future of Childcare initiative in partnership with Low Income Investment Fund, and the link to our webpage is in the chat. Through this initiative, we are taking a deep dive into the challenges facing the childcare market, as well as the investments and partnerships needed to support childcare providers. We will hear more about those resources with the speakers. With all this said, in many places, especially lower income communities and communities of color, affordable childcare isn't available to meet this need. High quality, affordable childcare needs to be part of the modern social safety net if we want to maximize our economic potential. Another very important consideration is that childcare operators are businesses. They are essential small businesses, and we should support them as such. Childcare businesses provide both income and asset building opportunities for the operators and their families. The childcare workforce, predominantly women and a large proportion women of color, are low-wage workers who struggle to make ends meet. I want to share some stats to bring this home for everyone. The childcare sector is dominated by small businesses, as I said. Only approximately 10% of young children are cared in a center run by the 10 largest for-profit chains of childcare centers. The total licensed care market consists of 75,000 center-based childcare businesses, for-profit and nonprofit, and over 91,000 licensed family childcare home-based businesses exist. This speaks to the importance and the need to support home-based providers as well as center-based providers. I mentioned that the providers are mainly women, many women of color. Over 96% of childcare business owners are women, and half are people of color. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the business model for childcare operators was already under financial strain, which makes the need for bold actions to support these essential businesses even more urgent. Communities, and all of us here today, have the chance to rebuild the childcare system with greater access for lower income families and people of color by addressing known challenges with its operating model. This in turn strengthens our workforce and our broader economy. Childcare providers need greater access to capital and other resources, and those supports need to be equitably distributed across the childcare system. Today, we'll talk about how financing in the childcare sector works and how it doesn't work, and new financing models that are being tested that may support childcare providers both as people and as business owners while recognizing the value they provide to our society. These resources can set them up for longer-term opportunities to build assets. On the panel today, we have diverse voices from the financing and philanthropic sectors and practitioners. Success involves new investments to support a sustainable operating model, and it will require partners from across sectors working together. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Bevan Parker-Cherkez, who is the Senior Program Officer in Childcare and Early Learning at Local Initiative Support Corporation. Welcome, Bevan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jocelyn, for the introduction. As she said, I'm Bevan Parker-Cherkez. I'm the National Program Director for our Childcare and Early Learning at LISC. I'm so pleased to be here with you all today to highlight this important topic. I'm tasked with lifting up some of the current challenges that the childcare sector is facing, touch on ways that we can support the sector today, and innovative models that we can look to as we think about a more robust, comprehensive interventions to create equitable systems and appropriately resource, stabilize, and offer opportunities for asset growth. I do have a few technical slides, so I'm going to go off camera now. I will show my face again later in the presentation, but for now I'll go off. And Beth, if you can go to the next slide for me. Thank you. So just quickly about LISC. LISC is a community development financial institution, or a CDFI. We were conceived by the Ford Foundation in 1979 and established to serve really as an intermediary. Thinking about that as a nimble nonprofit with strong community partnerships that connect hard to tap public and private resources with underinvested places and people working to access opportunities every one of us deserves. Today, we were one of the largest CDFIs in the country with a national footprint. We have 38 local offices and a network of rural partnerships that span 2,100 counties. While our suite of investments, program, and service areas have grown over time, our mission remains the same. Government, foundations, and for-profit companies have capital. We work closely and are led by our residents, community-based organizations, and local institutions who understand the needs of their community. And LISC helps to bridge that gap by offering relationships and expertise to assist community organizations in attracting and deploying the kinds of resources and capital that allow them to do their best work. Next slide, please. Regarding our work in early childhood education, we've worked for decades to expand and promote early childhood education by investing in age-appropriate settings to promote high-quality programs. LISC serves as an advocate, thought leader, and resource to the field, and we're poised to invest over $100 million, leveraging an additional $250 to support and increase the improvement and access to high quality early learning opportunities. LISC offers financing tools that bring low or no cost capital to early childhood facilities projects, including partnerships with state governments to create facility funds. We also provide expertise and technical assistance to build the capacity of early childhood providers and nonprofit community developers that build and improve facilities. We learn from our providers in local markets and work to amplify challenges and opportunities at a national level by collaborating with our partner organizations and informing our federal policy work to inform systems change. Our work really spans a continuum. We have some longstanding facility funds, such as those operating in Rhode Island, a recent partnership with the Department of Economic Security in Arizona that's administering time-limited ARPA funding to support facility needs. And through our local offices, we're able to deploy urgent capital, grant capital to support basic health and safety needs. And through our business development organization network, we can provide technical assistance to stabilize and grow childcare businesses. Next slide. So you've just heard about some of the unique supports that LISC as a CDFI administers in specific geographic locations. But we can't offer that same investment and those same programs in every place. And that's due to the complex and nuanced sort of system that we're faced with. So how did we get here? Communities have a rich, I'm going to do my best to do a broad overview here. So I'm going to talk through a little bit of what we're seeing in terms of our provider networks at the geographic level, and then the funding that goes to support them, and where we're coming up with some barriers and tensions between the two. Communities have a rich fabric of childcare options and provider types. Many are long-standing organizations that meet specific needs and are located in areas where families can access high-quality care. Some places, however, are still without access. Given the complexity of the system, I'll do my best to sort of offer a summary of what these provider networks can look like and how they're financed. So to start, we have some of our smaller scale providers, which are home-based childcare operators. These are providers caring for small groups of children in residential settings. An individual or maybe one or two additional staff are working there, and oftentimes can offer non-traditional hours or care that other places cannot. Our center-based locations are generally commercial spaces with learning and programs grouped by age. These have owners and directors and oftentimes a larger workforce. We have preschool programs, which are programs for children ages 3 to 5. Those can be in a variety of settings, sometimes schools, charters, districts, faith-based spaces, or childcare centers themselves. Then we have school age programming, which is before and after school care, holiday and summer breaks. And that's typically for children ages 5 to 12 or 13. And those can be sort of supported through any of the above. We also have family, friend, and neighbor care, which is care provided at home by a family, friend, or neighbor. So that's a wide range of program types to consider, and in settings ranging from someone's personal home to a school or a commercial building. It also means local licensing and regulation needs to address the distinctions in those forms of physical space, which can get very complicated. In addition to the high variability we have in setting type, we have a complicated financing landscape. There are numerous potential funding sources available to support children's access to early learning. And this needs to pay for the operations of a program, the workforce, and the facility of those programs. I'd like to just reference here the National Academies report that was released in 2018, which is seen here, and it does a great job of trying to convey and articulate the system complexities. It's a comprehensive read that I highly recommend to anyone who wants to dive deep on the system and recommendations for the future. This graphic was taken from that report and works to illustrate the different provider types at those varying quality levels. As I mentioned before, sort of your centers and your homes, of course, there are additional spaces, and then we have this variation in quality. It's not unusual for a childcare provider to be at this local level and then actually access multiple funding sources, sometimes 2, 3, or more distinct funding sources if they're able to qualify. So each of these sources then comes with their own rate of reimbursement or tuition, monitoring, compliance, and reporting, making the financial tracking an administrative headache, to say the least. Providers find that the compliance obligations to multiple funders can be burdensome because they currently must meet requirements of many authorities to generate revenue, even when most of these funding sources are not considering and fully supporting the total cost of care. I'll run through high level what some of these funding sources look like. As you can see, they're sort of articulated: the families, federal government, state and local, and then philanthropy and business. The Childcare and Development Block Grant Act is a law that authorizes the Child Care and Development Fund, or CCDF program, which is then administered by states, territories, and tribes. States can use those CCDF resources to provide financial assistance to low-income families to access childcare. They can also use these dollars to invest in improving quality through teacher workforce, supporting childcare programs to achieve higher standards, and providing education to help parents select family care opportunities that meet the family's needs. Head Start and Early Head Start programs are administered by the Office of Head Start, and those grant dollars and oversight to over 1,600 public and private nonprofits and for-profit agencies that offer Head Start services in local communities. We also have families that are paying the cost of care through private pay and tuition payments. Some locations have subsidy programs or scholarship programs available to supplement this cost for families, particularly those who are just over the income eligibility cutoff for CCDF funding. We have state and local sources, which may look like universal pre-K offerings funded by local mandates, voter initiatives, or taxes. And that tiny sliver denotes the philanthropic and business community. While small dollars are often, while these are small, they're more often the most flexible in terms of what they can support and how they're monitored and reported. They play a critical role in fueling innovative approaches to care, funding facility expansion or quality improvement, and other gaps that the aforementioned sources leave out. We ultimately find ourselves in a situation where our revenues are not covering the expenses and we're left with gaps. This results in things like longstanding practice of allowing childcare workforce to subsidize the cost through low wages. We have facilities that have trouble meeting baseline health and safety requirements. We now have operators that can't cover costs and families that can't pay for the services. Next slide. The system is frankly untenable and needs to change. The National Children's Facilities Network is a coalition of more than 70 nonprofit CDFIs, financial and technical assistance intermediaries, and early care and education stakeholders dedicated to helping providers develop high-quality physical learning environments and sustainable business models. Our policy priorities are listed here, but I'm noting that we share and support partners, advocates, and others in this work to realize a more comprehensive and supportive system. Cross-sector collaboration is critical to getting us there. I hate to bury the lead, but the fundamental sort of takeaway here is that we across the board really need to support and increase funding for the system. In fact, streamlining the way funding flows would also greatly impact the sector. We need to consider the needs of our educators and caregivers and offer a system that works for them. In the meantime, organizations and agencies can support these efforts through various activities. Technical assistance and capacity building efforts can support and look to streamline the business and administrative burden operators faced. A lot of it is sort of managing and braiding those funding streams I discussed during the previous slide. This can also take the form of shared services, which is sort of an organization or an entity or a network that may support sort of the back office for multiple providers. Facility development can also fall into this category and offer support where childcare operators may not have it. Explicitly, we need to figure out how we can empower and not overburden our operators. And I'd just like to say that there's another opportunity really here for us to consider alternate sources of funding to identify and utilize, but we need to bear in mind the profile of an educator. Really quickly, an example is a home-based childcare operator. Is an entity that operates out of a person's residence, right? We ask them to think of themselves as a business and apply for funding. but oftentimes they're disqualified when they submit individual tax returns or ineligible generally for operating out of their personal home. There's so much tension there that we need to unpack and understand so that we can provide pathways for owners and the workforce to earn livable wages, build assets, and opportunities. There are deep dives in challenges and barriers that can be funded by philanthropy, fuel, and pilot innovative models that really support a new system. And with that, I'll pass it back to Jocelyn for our next speaker.
Great. Thank you so much, Bevan. You did a phenomenal job articulating the gaps in financing needed to support the childcare sector. And I think you did definitely hit home the point that it is going to require both private and public funding to strengthen the business model. So I want to move to our next speaker, Eileen Calderon, Communications and Community Relations Manager at Child Development Associates. Eileen, welcome. You were working on the ground with childcare providers. Can you tell us what you're hearing from the local providers that you work with and support?
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be joining you today. As Jocelyn mentioned, my name is Eileen Calderon, and I am the Communications and Community Relations Manager at Child Development Associates, also known as CDA. I will be sharing a little bit of that perspective of what we've been hearing from providers working in the field for 49 years. And to allow you to better see my slides, I'll be going off camera. If you could please go to the next slide. CDA is a community-based nonprofit in San Diego, California, that has been supporting low-income families with subsidized childcare services. We currently serve close to 13,000 children and collaborate with more than 3,400 childcare providers of all types, licensed childcare centers, licensed family childcare homes, and licensed exempt providers such as Family Friend and Neighbor. We support our community through a whole family and dual generational approach, collaborating with many community-based and private organizations to provide our clients with the best support and services. We know the critical role that childcare plays for families to be able to work, go to school, and seek employment. We know that without childcare, our workforce and our economy cannot thrive. But we also know that our childcare providers are struggling to stay open and grow their business. In the last 10 years, the number of licensed family childcare home providers and childcare centers has steadily decreased. Childcare Aware of America reported that during COVID-19 pandemic, close to 16,000 childcare providers closed nationwide between December 2019 and March 2021. And since then, many others. Families are struggling to find childcare, but childcare providers can keep their doors open. Next slide, please. The childcare challenges experienced by families and providers are defined by a low supply of early care and education workers, the cost inflation for both staff and services, low wages and benefits for childcare providers, lack of small business support, and a persistent shortage of affordable childcare options for families that they can trust and meet their needs. So we know that childcare providers support the healthy development and well-being of children, but what can we do to support them and their business? Next slide, please. Through many programs the CDA administers, especially through our Care San Diego program that we administer with mission-driven finance, which we will be learning more about later in this presentation. Childcare providers share several obstacles limiting them from growing their business and serving more children. One of them is the rising cost of purchasing and renting buildings. High startup costs and fees have been limiting providers from opening new centers and family childcare homes, from renting properties that allow them to increase their capacity and provide quality early care and education. One of our providers said, startup costs and renovations are very high. I don't have the kind of money saved, and I've been a childcare provider for 15 years. Many childcare providers don't qualify for rent affordability programs or grants. Even though we already know that childcare providers are making low wages, many don't qualify for public assistance programs. One of our providers said, I want to grow my business, but I barely make enough to cover my rent and business expenses. There are other roadblocks that providers go through, such as local zoning, permits, and licensing inspections. And many don't know how to navigate or where to access technical assistance. And we also heard that family childcare home providers are unfortunately many times limited by their landlords to make renovations to the property in which they care for. One of our providers said, "I have great ideas for my daycare, but my landlord doesn't allow me to make renovations or upgrades to the house." It is definitely not the provider's passion or commitment that has been the obstacle or challenge. Next slide, please. So what can we do? We need innovative opportunities and program models that address the challenges that our providers are so loudly sharing with us. We need models that include community-based partnerships between organizations that providers already know and trust. If we want providers to grow their business, we need models that provide technical assistance and support for effective small business operations. We need supportive and understanding landlords and programs that address the unique business needs of childcare providers. And we need systems that are helping providers gain assets and capital for generations to come, as well as increasing wages, benefits, and workforce opportunity. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Eileen. You laid out the concerns and issues that providers face, but you also outlined solutions. And speaking of solutions, we're going to transition now to Lauren Gratton, the co-founder and chief community officer at Mission Driven Finance. And MDF, or Mission Driven Finance, has been working on an innovative model that seeks to address the root causes of the issues that we're addressing and that Eileen highlighted. Lauren, can you share your model and what you hope to accomplish?
Yes, thank you, Jocelyn. Pleasure to be here. As noted, I'm co-founder and chief community officer of Mission Driven Finance. And I'm so honored to follow behind Bevan and Eileen, who laid out so many of the challenges and what the opportunity is. Backing up just really briefly, Mission Driven Finance has an extremely descriptive name, but we are an impact asset management firm based in San Diego, designing, developing, and managing impact capital solutions to advance more inclusive economic opportunity. And we've been trying to figure out since our founding, can we identify a way to get more financing to this broken system of childcare? That's one of the best drivers for more inclusive economic opportunity, multiple levels, for the kids, of course, for their families, their parents and caregivers, for providers, and for a workforce. This is a critical strategy across the board, and we wanted to figure it out. So on the next slide, I'll move into some of these pieces. Why focus on real estate for childcare? Bevan and Eileen already gave a really fantastic macro and micro, but effectively, we have this challenge of scale to serve more children, to serve more families, comes from having more licensing. Moving from that family, friends, and neighbors structure to a family childcare home or maybe a group, being able to move into a larger facility and serve more kids in a commercial setting, that comes from licensing. And on the next slide, we see licensing is a combination of the provider and a location. And on the next, we are seeing we're not having locations. Eileen laid it out well, all of those different challenges that folks are having with real estate, but that means that we're not getting more licensing, not getting increase of capacity on an individual license, and that's happening at a massive scale, which is keeping us from serving kids and families. So on the next slide, summary of things that we've already heard. There are many different elements that are challenges for providers in real estate. On the next, just keeping moving through this because we want to move into solutions. Focusing, as we've heard, providers that are stressed about their lease or landlord then are spending their time focusing on things that are administrative and challenging instead of thinking about how can they be providing more direct quality care? How can they be providing the support that families need. And worrying about being displaced, having a short-term lease, something that ends in a year, they're not really incentivized to invest in their space. Or Eileen shared a testimonial that somebody said that their landlord wouldn't let them put new maybe furniture or installations for the childcare space into their rental unit. So these are some of those challenges. And if we can finance this real estate aspect, we think that there's also a way that we can get more investors to be excited and to crowd more money into the early care and education space. For many, they've looked at financing providers directly, which is absolutely needed. Please don't stop doing that. Continuing to finance providers is addressing some of the challenge, but it doesn't always fit into an investor's portfolio structure. And many hold real estate. That's a key part of their portfolio for meeting their financial goals. But this is an opportunity to have real estate that is specifically dedicated to childcare. So next slide. What are we talking about here? We have ideated this care access real estate or CARE model, and we have three primary goals with this, and they're somewhat in order. First and foremost, we want to increase quality licensed childcare capacity. So we are creating dedicated childcare properties. Is this focus on care that enable providers to scale. And through that, we're also saying, because this is a childcare home or this is a childcare center, that we can help to stabilize childcare businesses by being that friendly landlord and providing, and through our partnerships with CDA, Children's Cabinet, Wildflower Schools, and others, we can help connect to supportive resources for them to be able to grow. And lastly, we want to be supporting the wealth of childcare providers. This is rooted in all sorts of legacies of intersectional racism, why providers are not being paid what they deserve. But by being able to build in a structure where providers may have the opportunity to purchase their home or their center after 2 or more years of successful renting, or share in the appreciation of the asset. This allows for some to step into home ownership, some to step into owning a building and being able to have a consistent source of stability and wealth. And I know sharing the appreciation of the asset is an extraordinarily technical term, but that means that if they were to invest $30,000 in playground equipment and then get kicked out of their space, that $30,000 of playground equipment that got installed there didn't go with them. If for us in the CARE model, if they invest that and the value of the property increased, then if we were to sell it, they would share in half of this, that increase of say $30,000. So they would walk away with 15. So this is our model, 3 key focuses. On the next slide, we'll talk about what is it? So we are intending to purchase and hold national portfolio of childcare real estate. This will be half commercial childcare centers and half residential childcare homes by kind of dollar amount. Obviously, centers cost more than most houses. So this is how we want to kind of balance this out, addressing both the childcare needs in the commercial and residential settings. We're doing this by partnering with strong care ecosystems, places and networks that may not be geographic, that have wraparound support for providers, helping them to navigate a very complex environment so that they can grow their scale and quality. And our partners are helping us to support and source quality providers, those that already have maybe a waiting list. And if they could move into a larger space or get licensed for serving more kids, that they could do that. Those that are, but for having access to supportive real estate, could be serving more children. And our deep roots in equity, because we're entirely focused at mission-driven finance on advancing inclusive economic opportunity, that's allowed for some really great market opportunities, frankly. We have a fascinating and unique federal moment with American Rescue Plan Act, with the Inflation Reduction Act, still some legacy of CARES Act funding that is flowing through in new ways, and with the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, really focused on supporting those that have been overlooked and underestimated from a historical standpoint. And our roots in equity also allow for sometimes partnerships where, because they want to find somebody that is mission aligned or values aligned, we may be able to have real estate opportunities that we can source off market, not be combing through Zillow listings, but be able to have things that become available for care because they really want to have childcare in their community. Next slide. Believe it or not, this is a simplified diagram. I make very complex ones, and suffice to say, building a large national real estate investment trust has many nuances. But what I wanted to get across here is that it can be challenging to figure out, how do we insert into a broken system of childcare? Where do we even start? We have grants here, or we have I have this debt available at this level. We have figured out ways to work with most every type of investor, including in the grants and service contracts. Really pleased to have a partnership with Nevada and Children's Cabinet there, and helping to flow some of their ARPA funding specifically for childcare in residential settings. But we can work with grants and service contracts. We can work with equity investors, we can work with debt investors, and those can be at a national level or at a local level, where we are going to be working with these care nodes, these community investment companies, with our ecosystem partners. So you can focus on either a national portfolio of care or a localized focus of commercial and residential properties. Next slide, please. So I mentioned briefly a REIT, or a real estate investment trust, which is meant to be that you acquire business or acquire properties and then have income and distributions for shareholders from rent. And that is it. It is not meant to be a build and sell quick model. It is meant to be a long-term stable hold, which is exactly the kind of things that we want to be able to provide our care providers. That long-term stability of, I know that I've got a place here that is dedicated to childcare, and I have a landlord that is looking out for me and connecting to resources that I need. It is a perfect match in terms of, what is this asset? What is the intention of investors? And what do we want to be able to provide for the care providers? For investors, it's a familiar structure. Most every large investor has REITs in their portfolio, and there's a increasingly specialty REITs that are dedicated to impact. And that is a great way for us to, again, crowd in more capital to a broken system. But I don't want to take up more of our time. We need to hear from the fantastic September Jarrett. So really quick, scoot to the next slide. This is all to say that we work with both our childcare ecosystem partners and our real estate, and this is flowing into how we select properties and match candidates for that. We're happy to answer more questions down the line. And I think that leaves me just one last slide. Oh, yes, this is where we are launching. We are launching in San Diego, in Clark County, Nevada, in Southeast Michigan, and nationally with Wildflower Schools, who support folks in many different locations. And we are exploring what phase 2 looks like, but places where there is a strong provider ecosystem and local government support. The real estate matches what we are capable of acquiring for the REIT, and investors are interested. And with that, I think thank you to the folks that have brought us to where we are so far, including Rising Simons. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. I'm very familiar with the CARE program because I live in Las Vegas and am really excited about the program and what it can do to stabilize locations and build assets for childcare providers. So speaking of philanthropic support, we're going to transition over to September Jarrett with Rising Simons Foundation. We've heard a number of times the importance of and the value of bringing the philanthropic sector to support childcare providers. So September, can you tell us why you and your organization are interested in this space? And what is the longer term change you hope to see from the investments you're providing?
Thanks so much, Jocelyn. And Lauren, thanks so much for sharing the inspiring care model. We're pleased to be one of the many supporters that are supporting that innovation. So I'm September Jarrett. I'm a program officer at the Rising Simons Foundation, and I'm really honored to join this panel and share a funder perspective on why we invest in the space and the impact we're seeing. For quick context, Rising Simons is a family-based foundation based in the Bay Area. We work nationally on pressing issues of our time, including climate and clean energy, human rights, representation in journalism and science, and last but not least, in early care and education, our biggest and longest standing program. In early childhood, our vision is really a U.S. system of early learning and care in which uplifts children, families, practitioners, and communities so they all can thrive. As my colleagues have shared, our current sort of system or non-system is unsustainable and unjust and sorely underinvested for the quality and complexity of the work that it takes to nurture our next generation. At Rising Simons, we believe that disrupting the inequity and injustice of our current early care and education system will require a vast investment of public dollars on par with K-12, and essentially a paradigm shift that I saw in the questions and answers from thinking about early care and education in homes, in communities, in schools as a private good to a public good. We further believe that not only do we need more public investment, that public investment should address both operating, so the jobs of care and education are good jobs, and capital to address the child care deserts, the lack of spaces in far too many communities in our country, but also the poor quality learning environments that some children are in for many hours of the day because of the lack of investment or capital. So in terms of facilities, you may be feeling like the challenge is big and the lift is large. Yet there's tons of opportunities we see from the model shared by my colleagues. We truly believe that partnership is the key. You might be thinking, and I'll just be honest, one state-of-the-art facility to serve a few hundred kids where I'm talking to you from in California would exhaust my entire grants budget for the year. So facilities can feel overwhelming, but there's solutions to be brought to bear in partnership, and there's a really critical role for philanthropic dollars. So we invest in facilities and are proud to be part of this movement. And we think about our grant making in 3 ways that I'll share with you. First, our grant making really focuses on sharing evidence and models and tools of what works. So, for example, Bevan shared that National Academy of Sciences report on financing. We were proud to be one of many funders of that study. That's really important. More recently, we were proud to co-fund LISC's Making Space Matter report and toolkit, which really dives into the evidence for facilities and how to address the challenge, focusing on state and local administrators of public systems. Second, another line of our grant making really centers this public-private partnership idea, and that seed money and flexible dollars, philanthropic dollars can really forge and bring together partnerships of usual sort of in-sector ECE leaders and out-of-sector partners to really work on the facilities challenge at a community level, where that's a city, county, state. And really create coalitions that think about the policy opportunities and barriers that need to be addressed to make capital more available, lower cost, and more flexible, specific to providers, including center and home-based providers. And last but not least, bring technical assistance to bear on facilities issues. Build Up California is an example of a network here in our home state of California that we're proud to support with our grant dollars. Third, we offer early stage seed capital, ideas to respond to emergencies or envision something that doesn't yet exist. The innovation kind of seed capital was really well illustrated by Lauren in the CARE model, and we were pleased to join with many others to help that idea get started. In COVID response, our family childcare sector was incredibly damaged by COVID closures, and there were huge financial impacts on family-based providers and home. And we were pleased to join with national partners at Homegrown to ensure there was emergency assistance made available to home-based providers in a range of communities throughout the country, including here in our local Bay Area. So those are examples where some seed capital can really stimulate new ideas, create policy change, and kind of water collaboration to make a difference in this space. I want to just offer, we're a mighty movement in this room, and some of you have experience, and I invite people who are already working in the child care facility space to drop any exciting ideas or efforts that you're engaged in into the chat so we can share with each other. And if you're newer to the space, I just want to offer a few questions or ideas about how I might think about taking what we're learning in the conversation today and moving to action. If you're a local funder, like a United Way or a community foundation, perhaps you can think about a facilities needs assessment or some more information about what the facilities challenge and opportunities are in your area. An example, I was recently at a convening of local in San Mateo, California, and local funders enhanced with grant dollars a pretty narrow state mandated childcare needs assessment about what is, and funded 10-year future projections about what their region and county needed in terms of childcare spaces, types of programs that parents wanted to see, ages of children served, and what portions of their regions most needed childcare spaces. And a little grant dollar on top of that public charge went a really long way to create actionable information for that community. If you fund in policy and systems change, consider how childcare facilities financing might fit in your larger policy agenda for childcare policy, for asset building, for community development, financial institutions. And if you're a funding organization already, think, how are you prioritizing childcare and stretching your thinking about your asset building work or your nonprofit finance work to really take bets on childcare and in your lending programs and in your community? I will say there's a perception at times because of underfunding that childcare providers are a risk. I have never seen a sector do more with a dollar and take it more seriously than the leaders in early care and education, because they have to. And in closing, I just want to offer this conversation is we all have more to offer than our dollars. Dollars are critical to fund and make capital available to this challenge. But we also hold power beyond our dollars. The more than 200 of us in this Zoom room are a movement, and we can all educate our networks on the critical childcare crisis and the facility crisis in our country. And really come together in a movement to move from small scale investments and actions to the large scale transformation our communities need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, September. I think the funders on the line you've given them plenty of examples of how they can support the sector. So, and thank you for the great work that you're doing as well.
And I thank you all. I want to also thank Jocelyn for your wonderful moderating and for all of the speakers. I just want to note before I turn it back over to Jocelyn for the moderation is there are so many great questions. We will probably not be able to answer them all, but I just want to say if Bevan and the folks from MDF will be available to answer any questions later on, we can share their contact information on the technical aspects of their funds. And also September, if you're willing and funders would like to connect with you in other geographies, we can share that later. Please do share any additional resources you have in the chat for others. I see some being shared open live. And don't forget to fill out the survey at the end, but I want to make sure that we do have about 10 minutes for questions. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Jocelyn.
Great. Thank you so much, Mona. Yes, and thank you to the speakers. This was fabulous, great information shared by everyone. So this is a question I want to open it up for whoever wants to jump in and anyone that has a comment. There is a question online that references a report from Department of Treasury that's describing childcare non-system as a failed market. So it's mentioning public good and describing childcare as a public good. How do we resolve what may be a contradiction of thinking of childcare as a private market-based service versus funding childcare and early education as a public good? Anyone want to jump in on that one? And Mona, you can jump in as well. So if you have something to add on that one as well, please, September, jump in.
I think there's lots of room to explore this issue and how we can and must do better. The Heising-Simons Foundation takes a point of view that here in the US, we consider education a public good. And while it's not a perfect system, we see and experience public education as an important community asset. Early education really is that, those critical first years of life when your neural pathways are being developed and opportunities are created or limited is no different. And in fact, the brain science shows us earlier support and intervention has the greatest return the younger you are. And so we take a point of view, since we have an American value of education, let's just stretch that education a little younger. And in communities where we see and do invest generously and well in early education, we see great outcomes. We see children thriving, we see parents working, we see community economies able to function, and we see long-term rewards that when children are loved on and cared for well in those critical early years, they thrive in school, in work, and that sort of investment recycles back. And so we're one of the few industrialized countries that chooses not to invest up front in these critical early years of child development and family formation, and we see good models to do that. It's a huge lift. We know not everyone shares our view, but if we look at our states and communities that, for example, are making public pre-K available and some of the gains we see in communities like Boston or states like New Jersey, where there's been a critical long-term investment, we can see the power of what we would gain by making that public good shift.
Great, thank you, September. Anyone else want to jump in?
I would just support September's work and thinking about that. I think the other piece too is, I mean, we've had such a hard time articulating the need of this, and obviously through COVID, this has been really critical for people. I think the connection points that we can make to the workforce and enabling people to get back to work and having their children cared for in a loving and safe environment is another critical point that we could make some headway on. And I think we have seen some of that success in recent years. So that's just another sort of thing I'll throw out there as we think about what a new system could look like.
Great, thank you for that, Bevan. So this one is for Lauren. Residential child care centers are asking a question about your portfolio. Are those put together as sale or leaseback deals with the child care provider? I think we want to just kind of get to how is this help support and build assets for the child care provider?
So I wish I had clear, clean answers, but we want to be meeting folks where they're at. In some cases, we may explore a sale leaseback. In some places, we are also partnering with local government or nonprofit partners that may have down payment assistance. So there are multiple structures. I think that one's best for us to answer separately. But it'll be a good conversation depending on what are the unique circumstances of each organization.
Great. Okay, thank you. So we have a question referencing or referring to climate risk and how that may impact centers and locations. Do you see that potentially harming the potential for developing child care centers in some locations that face higher risk from the climate crisis? And do you all see this becoming a problem in terms of exacerbating current child care deserts or creating new child care deserts? And I guess we could take it from a couple of different perspectives, from a funder's perspective. And then Eileen, as you look at child care deserts and supporting providers, are they looking at climate risk as a concern? Has that been elevated by any of the providers that you service? So it could go to all of you.
Well, that definitely hasn't been one of our providers' concerns. There's just been such a hard and difficult place for providers to even be able to find space at this time. Even in San Diego, just finding a property that providers can rent. Rent has gone significantly high. Finding, as I covered in my presentation, opening a center, just starting cost, fees, licensing. There's just so much more that has come into play that I don't think that has even come up yet, at least not from the work that we've been doing or what providers have been sharing with us in the field.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Because there's a lot of technical questions, and as Mona said, we'll answer those directly. So before we wrap, is there anything else that anyone would like for the folks on the line to take away? That last comment that you want to share very quickly as a takeaway for everyone listening in with us today.
I just want to reiterate the cross collaboration, cross sector partnerships. Like, this can't happen. It's a huge lift. It's daunting, but it's really important for us to be, thinking about what a future could be like with a really functional system, and then also, in the meantime, working on these supports that we can address today. And so it's going to take all of us, and we just so appreciate forums like this to be able to share these ideas and concepts.
Great, thanks so much, Bev. And this is definitely all hands on deck. It's going to take everyone, cross-sector, collaborative, and we had a really great cross-sector group of speakers today. So I want to thank you, and it has been absolutely my pleasure moderating the discussion today, and I'm going to turn it over to Mona to close us out.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Jocelyn, and Eileen, and Bevan, and Lauren, and September. Thank you so much for your perspectives. We say at AFN as a funder network that it's not necessarily philanthropy's role to solve, but philanthropy has a critical role to play, as do all of the sectors. And so this is a topic that we will continue to look at AFN. We will continue to elevate as part of our care economy work, lifting up care providers, and in this case, both the people that are providing childcare services in a way that helps them both build economic security and assets and preserve those assets. So Sorry, we could not get to all of your questions. Just as a reminder, we have recorded this webinar. We will make the recording and all of the slides available. I think Lauren and Bevan dropped their emails into the chat. We'll also make that available. For funders, September it is available, and you can email me and I'll make that connection. And I just want to thank you for spending the time with us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.